We're going to talk a lot about innovation. This board in back of me, this looks really cool, this ping pong table, has two sides of it. What starts innovation, or what sparks it, and what stops it. So that's kind of the theme tonight. We're going to explore those topics with our brilliant panel here. I want to start, because if we don't start with this, someone's going to raise their hand and ask us to do this. Just trying to define the word before we get going. Now, it so happens that I have a long-term project called the Dictionary of Innovation. So I've been thinking about this for a while, and I realized this is the one definition I have to nail to have this book, and I hadn't really given it enough thought yet. So I'm thinking about it. I want to just throw it out there to start with, and we can kind of together shape it, see if it's okay. It's probably not yet, but so here it is. I like to do things really briefly, so that's the difficulty of doing this. But an innovation is any invention that makes the world change around it. So anybody have a comment on that? What's wrong with it? What is working for you? Mohan had a longer one which seemed accurate to me, but again, I'm trying to get it really short. So for the purposes of this, how short can we make it and still be true? Any thoughts? Sounds okay?
One of my favorite answers that I've ever heard about what is innovation happened over a glass of bourbon, and it was, think 2001 Space Odyssey, the monolith. It's like, okay, what is, I studied that in school, I know what like the symbolism, but what's your thing? And he said, well, every time a monolith showed up was when all the existing technology had exhausted itself. And it was a monumental leap. So he's like, think the monolith.
I didn't think of that when I saw the movie. Does everyone remember that?
Yeah.
Can we say that?
Huge leap.
Huge leap.
Yeah.
Everyone can see.
If I could add to that, I'd say that from personal experience, it's a dance actually.
A dance
Between me and the idea and the person I'm trying to impact.
Mm-hmm. So there's three people dancing.
That's cool.
Okay. I like that idea that people are transformed by it. Okay, all right. So let's use that as our working definition for now. What's the difference between creativity and innovation? Because people do use them interchangeably sometimes. Do you want to start, Mohan?
Sure. These are only my thoughts, so you can take it for what it is. Creativity is that which fuels innovation. So it is the source that you tap into
So it's an ingredient
to generate
or it's
the output
all
of
right.
innovation.
Yeah, it
Is
causes
that too many words?
innovation. No, it's an input to innovation, maybe the input.
Yeah.
Anybody else? Thoughts on the difference?
Yeah, I think at times creativity can be a box. People, when you see investment, corporate investment, innovation functions, they say, see, we checked that box. We're paying people to be creative. But if they don't execute, like innovation is execution. Because if you can't put it out there, nothing's going to happen. So
Something has to happen.
it's a vital ingredient, yes. But if you can't execute on those creative insights that are going to make something better, if you don't execute it, it doesn't mean anything.
As creative as you want and still not be innovative.
Yeah, exactly.
And
Well,
yes.
And there's probably something to be said about why it is that both of those words are such fetish objects in this particular moment in time. Why is it that we say the word innovation and the word creativity and everyone gets a little buzz up their spine? And what is it about the work those words are doing in, 2014, late capitalism, post-Enlightenment West, blah, 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 where, what would we have talked about 50 years ago when arguably some of the most important transformative things were being created? Were we necessarily saying those people were creative or innovative? I mean, as I was getting out of the car to come here, there was a conversation on the radio about Margaret Sanger and about birth control, an innovation that radically changed pretty much the lives of everybody in this room. Do we think about that as having been about creativity? Not really. It was about scientific exploration, politics, and a social agenda. It was also about a critique of power. It also necessitated the expenditure of money, mostly all outside of, what we would think of as traditional private enterprise. I mean, for me, there's sort of something that says we make a moment right now about creativity and innovation, but if you look at some of the things that fit your definition that profoundly transformed us, for better and for worse, I would argue, you know, there's some other things that are part and parcel of that story that creativity tends to bury. And so does innovation, frankly. I mean, you don't end up surfacing conversations about politics and the body and morality and, you know, sort of philosophical questions, all of which may also be part of the puzzle.
So an innovation can be negative.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Do you not believe that?
I'm thinking about it. I think it's probably not intended to be negative, but it could have definitely, you know, side effects.
I think you could say that there are lots of innovations that didn't necessarily propel positive outcomes.
So I guess my question is, can we call that an innovation?
To the definition of that it transformed people's lives, absolutely.
And my definition too, which is it changes the world around.
Yeah.
So we have to watch out, basically. Right?
Well, I think there is an
Watch out
argument.
what you create.
I mean, I think there is an argument that says the 20th century is littered with innovations that profoundly changed the way we lived our lives that aren't necessarily good. And that people at the time probably thought they were embarking on radical moments of creativity and scientific exploration, and the next instant it went boom, literally and figuratively.
Yeah. So Jeff, were you going to say something?
I love your answer.
That was,
I just
that was prearranged. Thank you.
no, I just think we are kind of reckless in our how fast we run at innovation and technology, and we don't think about it enough. And we don't. There are so many implications that are actually pretty apparent to us, like the neuroscience of interactive design, or our product design, or mobile, or any of these things have profound effects on people's lives. I mean, I've seen it in my family, and I think we are pretty reckless with this stuff. We, as a Western culture, we just run at this very fast, and we don't think of it, and we don't think of it virtuously. We think about it as getting to the next result, and so I actually believe in everything you just said.
Sorry.
It's true.
You think it's possible to predict the side effects of an innovation, or
Yeah, I
yeah?
do. I think it is. I think you can say that people do better by having less noise in their life, you know, and technology is about more noise in your life. And to me, that's very basic. And I think we're running very fast again at putting more noise in people's lives, you know. All the big companies are doing it. So, I mean, it sounds idealistic, it sounds almost utopian, but I do think the brakes have to be put on about technology and how we are infecting people's lives with it.
Mm.
And my suspicion is even if you couldn't predict the specifics, you can predict the arc of the response, right? I mean, you know, we've historically called it the hype curve. Oh, amazing new thing, here it is. Excellent, everyone must have it. Immediately followed by, oh God, what a terrible idea that was. Immediately followed by some, you know, negotiation to, you know, acceptance. But we know that lots of new technologies and indeed innovations, right? Not just sort of what we think of as technologies of the last 20 years, were often accompanied by sort of naive utopianism, where it was kind of seen as the answer to everything.
So can you think of an example where that's happening right now?
I was going to say the Internet of Things would be my classic example.
The Internet of Things.
Sure.
Yeah.
I mean, there is a thing that is now freighted and loaded with the language of democracy, transformative. It's going to transform cities, it's going to transform urban landscapes, it's going to transform healthcare, it's going to transform the way we live in buildings, it's going to transform our homes, it's going to bring new forms of social process and democracy and openness, all of which are cultural statements as much as they are technical statements. And you know that every time you say the phrase, the Internet of Things, there are a whole set of pieces that are erased. You never talk about people. And there were people building it, installing it, repairing it, managing it, legislating it, and the subjects and objects of it. You don't ever talk about where it is happening, and when you do, you talk about it in terribly generic terms. Smart city, smart house. Well, you know, making Portland smart is a very different proposition than making Jakarta or Istanbul or Dakar or Shanghai smart. And my house versus the house of my colleagues in Tokyo, completely different propositions for smartness. So you've got a place problem, and then you have a things problem. What do we imagine the Internet of Things is connecting? I mean, if you listen to people, it runs the gamut from telegraph lines and traffic lights to toothbrushes. And what those have in common is they are vertical with things at the top. But they don't have a lot else in common in terms of what they mean to us, in terms of how we think about those things. And the first time you have a conversation with someone who says, I've made an internet-connected toothbrush. Awesome. And it has a gamification engine. And you have to take your phone to the bathroom, and you go, wow, okay, why? And there's an immediate set of questions that I know, bless, because you could, what are you doing? Brushing my teeth. Exactly. Right. So there's something about the landscape of things, right, where they have different resonances and values and relationships to us, and all of that disappears. You say the Internet of Things will radically transform everything, and you're like, uh-oh, because there's all that stuff hiding.
We struggle with, it's like a Seinfeld movie, right? It's all about nothing. And I think that if you focus, I'm focused on healthcare. And I think I should be worried about, and I think all of us should be worried about the health of our country and our world, and we should be worried about the impact of higher insurance prices that can make people bankrupt, and the prices of how care is delivered and how sometimes things can go out of control. We should be worried about education and what's happening with the premiums associated with the cost of education. And those things don't fall in line with technology being shoved into your face with different ideas about that. So innovation that's driven around a lens of values, your value to provide care or delivery or transform someone's lives, I don't think they fall prey to some of the things we are talking about. I think it's all about the lens you use and the cause that's greater than yourself that takes you out of your...
being invented right now.
Narcissism is not innovation.
No,
right.
not at all.
It's not. It's
No,
just,
it's not, for sure.
it's Seinfeld.
Well, there is a trap when people, when you hear about, when you were talking about consequence, and I have a feeling that Oppenheimer had a serious crisis of conscience when he transitioned from, wouldn't it be cool if we could crack this code? Then he said, why are we doing this? Why are we creating this destructive force that could kill millions of people? Well, a minute ago, it was really cool because aren't we really smart? But now it's like, yes, we're really smart, we prove that out, but what's it going to mean? And so I think lately, if you keep your eye on the ball of always asking why, why would you do that? Well, is it cool to get in a car accident because someone's turning off their washing machine at the traffic light?
With their smartphone.
It's interesting.
Is that awesome, or
It is,
maybe
but
not so awesome?
You bring up Oppenheimer, and Oppenheimer was America's Einstein, right? And he was still a product of the American military, right? He was just doing what he was told to do. And I still look across the corporate landscape, Google, Apple, Microsoft, whatever, Facebook. Everybody's kind of doing what they are asked to do for the benefit of business or whatever, or propagating the American agenda. And there isn't a lot of, is this really going to do people any good? Is this the right thing to do? Facebook is a great example. It's a great company, great designers there. Obviously, some of the most brilliant people, but what are they doing? What are they doing to us? And it's so funny you bring up Oppenheimer, because that's a dramatic example. It's a great example though, because I think we are kind of in that same mode where you have people working on this meta level that are going to have amazing effects on people. And I do think it's for kind of some objective business or kind of future thinking voice that doesn't make that much sense to us as people. I think, I don't know.
And before we end up, too desperately deep down that rabbit hole that I seem to have instigated, about which I immediately feel terribly bad.
Wow. Why are we using this word innovation suddenly so much? And why is it just the word itself so powerful? What is it that's happening that makes this important?
Yeah, isn't it an interesting question? Well, I think it's partly because it's shiny. I think there's partly a piece of it was where I sort of started, right? What is erased when you talk about innovation? I think you don't have to talk so much about discipline or about, rigor. There's an interesting piece where, we talk about innovation and creativity, but I think of, some of the founders in the UX field who also talk about the fact that in order to do good innovation, you actually need to have discipline, repeatable process, and rigor. And when we talk about innovation, we tend not to focus on those pieces, right? We focus on the kind of brilliant idea, shiny object, acquired. And so for me, there's sort of something about what is the cultural work the word is doing. And my suspicion is that it's partly tied up with a deeper set of ambivalences and anxieties about science, about the school system, about discipline, about what it meant to come out of a period of time when ideas were very much restricted and controlled about where they were produced and by whom. And innovation is nice that way, right? It suggests lots of people can have ideas and break that conversation open. But it also then erases some of the building block pieces that we know are necessary.
You don't think there's just a structural reason for it, that because of the time we're living in, that we've got a lot of problems to solve that are really big that only design and innovation and creativity can crack, because they're not going to give way to ordinary ways of thinking. They're just not going to budge.
Yes and no. I think we celebrate certain kinds of innovations, but I'm willing to bet most of us in the room suffer through a series of daily inadequacies of things that would be much better to be solved. Like, it would be excellent if someone would actually put all of the energy into solving why it is that we have to recharge all of our devices at least once a day in order to get through a day. It would be delightful if someone would actually go and really seriously think about energy consumption, public transportation, any number of things to deal with diseases in our bodies. There's like some basic human pain points that we all manage through at big and small levels. And those would be excellent to go talk about what would innovation look like in those spaces. What would innovation look like in the school system, in our political system, in our healthcare system? But instead we're having a conversation about what is the next way to monetize the sharing economy. And I like the sharing economy. I think it's great. More innovation in that space is excellent. But when I think about using innovation, for me there are a series of basic things that you might want to go attack first. Disease control. Possibly some, vaccines for things. I have a long list.
Well, it seems like a lot of that work is being done, that kind of work.
But it's not the work. But it's not the work.
I think it's funny because if you look at the brain power of the United States and the Western culture, I don't feel it's going for the right thing. And I totally agree with what you're saying. We have, at Microsoft especially, we have so many amazing people making a run at some of the things that are like dead ends, like mobile or whatever. And they're not making a run at the things that are really going to make a difference in people's lives. So there's no money in it. There's no money in becoming a philanthropist. There's no money in changing the world in that way. But it is disturbing. And I think we're at a crossroads, and I think a lot of young people in America are feeling that. It's like, especially engineers, like young kids who can make things, build things with Arduino, with processing, whatever. They can make things and they try to change the world. And they're wondering, who am I going to apply this to? Is it going to be to a Microsoft or a Google or an Apple, or am I going to really apply this kind of thing? And I really do think we're at a crossroads, and I'm on the other side of it. I'm, 50 years old. I'm on the other side. I'm comfortable, I'm working in a corporation, but I do think things are changing quite a bit.
I hear you all talking about innovation as if it's easy, we can all do it, and the worst thing is that we have to watch out for what we do and be careful what we wish for. I haven't found that to be true in a lot of companies I've been working with, that they have no problem with innovation. And in fact, I have to teach them how to come up with an original idea. And that's a really interesting problem, because you have to think about how you do it, or if you do it. But let's talk about that for a minute. That's the name of this evening is What Sparks Innovation. So what is it? What is it that sparks innovation? Michael, what do you think? Like for you, let's say.
Well, I've been in a few spaces that had that name attached to it, and people, to your point, speak very freely about it, and as if it's something that's really easy to grasp if you do this, this, and this. It's like, where there's a will, there's a way. It's like, no, not really. Because you can have all the will in the world, but if you don't have the way, it's not going to happen. There's no guarantee.
Yeah.
And so, I always, my
Well,
partner and I were talking about,
what is it that helps you find the way? What is that thing that we need to develop in ourselves if we want to do this work?
well, usually you can, it's very difficult to do by yourself. Like as an individual, like you need people. You need a problem to solve for. You need people that you care about, that you want to solve that problem for. You need to have those insights. You need to care enough to ask them, like what that might look like for them, what that might feel like for them, what it might mean for them. And so, first that's the mandate, right?
There's no such thing as a lone genius here.
No, you need people. You need partners. You need teammates. You need experts that you can rely on. You also need resources. Okay, so if you don't have resources and you don't have the space, so I would say it's like if you have space that's safe to be iterative in,
Space.
to fail.
What kind of space are we talking about? Metaphorical
No, I mean
space?
opportunity.
Okay.
And I mean physical space to make, to iterate, to not be afraid to fail, like that protective zone that's it's okay to be uncomfortable. It's okay to do scary stuff. It's okay to try and fail. It's okay to learn from that. So you need space, you need that mandate, which also implies sponsorship.
All right.
So how many
here's a
clients
company.
or partners that you've had where you need a snowplow? You need someone to look out for me. You need someone to say, I got your back, and this is what I'm asking you guys to do, and I'm going to do everything I can to protect that, right? So you got a mandate and you have sponsors, and you need the resources, because you can say, we got this great idea, I've got a sponsor, but you can't pay for it.
Right. Innovation doesn't necessarily cost a lot of money, but it costs something.
It doesn't have to, but in some cases, it does. And resources don't always mean cash. It could be tools, it could be other partners that you really need, like thought leaders, enterprise leaders that you need to, in that like potion and mix of, that's the alchemy of your team, and so those are resources too.
But I think you've always also said we need something else. And I think you said it was storytelling, or exquisite storytelling, or something like that.
You do need that.
What do you mean by that?
You do need that. So many times, how many guys out there, you've had a great idea, you understand it, it's the genesis of your and your team's like effort and intellectual property and insight and even strategy, and you're so close to it that you just go, here's this thing, it's going to sate your thirst, and it's awesome.
And you just expect that the person
And
will
they're like,
immediately,
of course they're going to get it. It's like, no.
Yeah.
Like, what you really have to do is you have to understand, where did you start? What was the original insight? Who did you talk to? How did the team work together to solve against this? What kind of, like, every great story in a movie or a book, and every plot has got you overcome adversity to triumph. Like there's,
So you have to frame up the
Nemo was
problem.
born,
Yeah.
and then he swam up the. So it's like that's their classic formula, And so the great stories really help not only catalyze, but they help like infect people with the idea, and they understand it, and they can rally around it. And then when someone asks them about it, it's almost like, how many times have you ever seen a slideshow where the sound doesn't work of your friend's newborn baby? It's like, it's beautiful. Then when they put that Etta James track to it, you're like crying. Right? It's like, oh my God. That's story. That's there. We were talking about that earlier. That's storytelling. So it's really adding that dimension and that aesthetic.
Well, you know, when you think
Piece
about
to
it, you know, you get a job to be innovative, or to create something, and you and your team work on it. You have to remember that you and your team have expert skills, right? And maybe you trained for this. Anyway, you learned a lot of things that maybe the other people in your company have not learned. Not only that, you've been working on it for a while and dreaming about it and living it and going through all the problems. It took you a long time to get to this stage where you're ready to present the prototype. The people you're talking to and trying to get permission to go forward from don't have these advantages. Right? They don't know what you know. They don't instantly see the use of something. They don't know what you've gone through. And they don't have time to think about how it's going to work. So without a story, you're asking a lot from those people, right?
Yeah.
And even with the story, you're asking a lot.
Sometimes, yeah.
Yeah. So I think you get that question a lot, right? I've heard it from a lot of you. I have ideas, I just can't sell them into the company. They just squash.
Well, I think that's the culture issue, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
it is.
I don't know how to describe this, but I was at Intel in '82 when the 286 chip was an invention. And I saw people do incredible work. And everybody was upset at the same time. It was like everyone was upset because they wanted things different. And so the energy I was born into at Intel in the 80s was dramatic. And that's when we were loading Microsoft tapes to put Xenix or Unix onto the 286 chip. And I was in charge of that. And at least I thought I was. Now I'm in a healthcare company that is $9 billion in size, 5,000 employees, 22 different companies, of which 4 of them are Blue Cross Blue Shield, right? And we own and operate all of these companies. Some of them are startups, and then others are these large institutions that are responsible for the insurance and care of, 2 million Americans, right? And their families. The level of innovation that you can sort of experience, or I'm allowed to experience as Chief Innovation Officer across that dimension is hits your neck, right? You don't know what's going on. And when I was asked to take that job, I brought with me some of the experiences that I've had in high tech and in startups. But when I was given the task, they gave me another task. They said, innovation is a value in the company. We're putting it in as a value. Now go make it happen. So I'm used to the find smart people, hunt them, kill them, and bring them in, and then like feed them pizza and make fun of everybody else and say those are stupid people. We know what innovation is. And then when they give me the charter of what does innovation mean as a value, right? When the board gives you that charter, I have to really think. So I took my call from Gandhi, who said, if you want to change the world, start with yourself. And I thought, okay, what does that mean? Because he's Mr. Value to me, right? So I had to realize that innovation was no longer an elite opportunity. It wasn't about smart people doing smart things while dumb people watched. It became the right of everyone. And if it became the right of everyone, then my role becomes different. It is one where I have to bring out innovation from 5,000 people and enable their memory of when they were 13, because that's when they stopped innovating, and bring that energy back and say, it's your right. And that has taken us 3 years. And we've been working and working and working to use the foundation of that to transform a culture that is built on compliance because of healthcare. You don't want them to take risk on you. On the other hand, it's compliance, but then you have to transform them from compliance to intelligent compliance and then innovation. So our results have been significant because of that, because we took the role, and I had to take a personal risk of saying, we'll deal with the culture first and see the outputs later, which usually people don't have much patience for. And what we found is we've generated, in my innovation team, 4 companies we've launched in the last 3.5 years. We've got 1,000 ideas from the employees, and we've taken them to market, and we've produced about $100 million worth of value over a period of just 3.5 years, believing in people who are not these sort of elite innovators. They're people. And when I brought them in the team, there was one requirement. They had to be innocent. Because we live in such a world of skepticism, and everyone's telling you why something doesn't work. And the beauty of innocence is that you get to try something that you may have tried 10 times over, but you try it again. And so that's what's worked for us. It may not work for you, but it certainly is something we're
So you have this sort of
investing
suggestion box culture.
We don't have no suggestion box.
Okay, so what are the,
Because there's always somebody saying they want toilet paper, and it's got nothing to do with innovation. And so we got no suggestion box. We got an idea network where you are socially engaging in ideas. We have an idea network, and we have technology, but I insist in my team that we meet anyone who has an idea. Because the product of our output is not the idea, it's the person with the idea. And if we can frame ourselves around the people, the ideas will come. They are coming now. Take about a couple of years though. You have to last long enough to, because you can get shot if you're...
Innocent until proven brilliant.
Yeah, thank you. You'll get quartered now. He'll get quartered. That's a good line.
that's a good one.
If I could interject a little bit there, it's like
Sure.
We don't at Microsoft, and I worked at Apple for a while, and Google for probably about 2 weeks. We don't lack for ideas, you know. We lack for landing ideas and how to get these things into the populace and how to come up with ideas. There are so many young people coming up with ideas. It's just crazy, and it's a beautiful thing. But that's not the challenge. The challenge is to get them into engineering, get them into marketing, and get them to a place that you can actually make this something that people want to consume. Facebook deal with this, Google do, and Apple do. Of course, Microsoft does, and. So innovation is very important, and we rely on young people to kind of challenge all of us to do this, but landing these things and making them real is the hard thing right now, from my perspective.
What I'm hearing is that the great ideas that all these people are coming up with aren't full ideas. They're not complete ideas. They're the beginning of an idea, and it's not complete until you figure out how to get it through the system, whatever that system is.
Yeah, and I think,
Right.
I mean,
Well, and the best work to me is coming from app developers on iOS, like people who are coming up with new apps and new ways of doing things, new interactions, new social networks, and new ways of propagating their little idea across the network. The internet is still king, you know? The internet is the greatest innovation in our lifetime. And it's not about the operating system, it's not about the phone, it's not about the PC, it's not about any of that. It's about the internet. And the people who can make use of that as a game or as a, like Instagram did with photos or whatever, that's where the interesting stuff comes from. And it's not these big mega companies like Apple or us that makes these. It's the little developers who create these micro interactions that change your life. And that's where the innovation, to me, anyway, the things that I focus on come from.
Can we say that it's very difficult then for a large company to come up with really innovative?
Very difficult, because it's like, it changes your whole culture to shift that into something small. And that's why, that's a great thing about the West, though. It's like the young companies will always do well in this environment because they always will be taking these big companies down. Unfortunately, they sell out to these companies and they get absconded, and yeah, it's a bad thing. But
Well, there's always that trap of, you know, like you say, it's usually the the young brands, the young guns who have this chase brand mentality.
Yeah.
Because we have nothing to lose, okay? We're looking at the Holy Grail here, and the trap is once you find that success, you have to keep that mindset, and it's no longer we're chasing that guy, it's we're chasing the impossible.
Yes.
Because usually people stop and all of a sudden they're like, we're super successful, we're leading the industry, we got to protect this.
Right.
So you move from chase brand to protect the business mode.
Yeah.
Well,
And that's when
also, I
innovation
think
is
you-
tough.
I grew up in the chase the brand, and now I'm in protect the brand mode. And so it's just this crazy balance. But the exciting stuff that happens is out of Silicon Valley, out of Portland, maybe Seattle, maybe New York, people creating new shit that disrupts everything, you know? And there are tons of examples of that.
And it probably won't be noticed by any big company. In fact, you could bring it to them and they would just say, well, there's
Or they'll buy it for $1 billion. You know?
after they
Like-
can see the value of it. But
Yeah.
not until it,
But see the value of it is weird. We just bought Minecraft, and Minecraft is a business that's already built its base. It's probably not going to get that much bigger, you know? And Facebook bought Instagram, and it will get this much bigger. So people in big positions make stupid decisions. We have to realize that. They do. You know,
I would argue,
Phil Knight makes them. Everybody makes those dumb decisions, and they buy those
but I
things.
would argue that people who aren't famous or big make dumb decisions all the time too.
Yeah,
So you don't hear about
exactly.
them.
Yeah,
I agree.
yeah, which is awesome about living in Portland because you make bad decisions
No
that were
one-
artful.
I think innovation is something that can be in the heart of anyone, large or small, and the difference is courage. Because if you are fearful of losing your status quo, then no matter whether you're in a startup or in a large company, you're pretty much aged into protecting whatever you're protecting, and
And it causes you to undervalue upstarts, basically, and people with ideas that are different. And also that those ideas aren't producing any value that they would notice.
And I do know a number of larger companies who are my colleagues in many different parts of the world who are engaging in tremendous curiosity about what the future will hold and are really looking to reformat their culture and reformat their organizations. USAA is an example of a company that's constantly redefining itself, and others are doing that too. And Starbucks is not sitting quiet, and there are others who have that sort of energy that I think gives me hope, at least. But generally, you can draw the small is reckless and the large is conservative, and that's a general
Well, small
accompaniment.
is reckless, and you never hear about the failures, but when one succeeds, you hear about it.
Right.
And then that company, which perhaps succeeded accidentally, is stuck in a position where they don't know how to do it again.
I think the real obligation we all have, because we're all in larger companies, is to change that paradigm, is literally to force, because I joined a larger institution to have a larger blast zone in transforming healthcare. You can't do it by having one invention in your lifetime to really impact the ecosystem and the way payment flow occurs or the way care is delivered. You have to play inside the demon
to
itself.
innovate at will.
Yeah, and you have to fight your way out like they do in the movies, right? So.
But which also means, though, I mean, to your point earlier, which I thought was lovely, right? We actually have to work out how to not have innovation and creativity held hostage by a particular age group. So it's not just the precept of the young, because we're all out if that's true.
Yeah.
I'd like to imagine there was creativity left in me, although I'm not a millennial. I sort of think there's something about how is it that we actively say, listen, if innovation is an important value, it is something that you are going to foster in everyone. You will listen to ideas up and down ages, across both genders, across multiple lived experiences. Because part of what you want to say is, listen, if part of what makes good innovation is your ability to identify a pain point, your ability to see something that you could make that doesn't exist anymore, that's not just the precept of the young, right? Those of you who are baby boomers are going to have plenty of pain points moving forward that millennials are not going to understand. And not all of them are going to be technical, right? They don't all involve the internet. Indeed, many of, the most important innovations of the last 100 years weren't technical in the classic sense. elastic. Elastic transformed the way women occupy the world. Tampons the same. None of them involve the internet. So chances are, and those may be pain points you didn't understand, so chances are there's going to be a whole series of ways of thinking about what you might want to bring into the world, what the problems are you want to solve, and being able to listen to multiple voices. I mean, my kind of strategy to having a team that does innovation is to have it be as diverse as humanly possible in terms of background and experience, but also in terms of competencies and skills. And much like your experience, it took me a year just to get that team of people to work out how to have a conversation with each other that didn't devolve into, my discipline does it this way, you're wrong. I don't understand what you're talking about, you're wrong. To get people to have a space that they felt, you said it, trusted, right? Where they trusted each other and they had a shared investment in the relationships between the team. That actually takes time and work, but I think it functions best when it is as diverse as you can humanly make it at every vector that I can think
So
of.
get a lot of different kinds of people with different skills and have them focus on the problem and not on each other.
Well, no, I actually think it takes both of those things, right? I think teams that are good at innovation are also teams that trust each other and that have an investment in the relationships between the human beings in the team, not just about the problem they're trying to solve.
And we have insults per hour. I mean, my innovation team is just breaking every barrier of HR in the possible world because they're always engaging with each other at a very rapid level, and it's part of creating that culture all the time. We eat the same food because I only buy one type of food. We sort of generate a certain energy about us that needs to be there, right? So they are diverse, but then you set rules that make them similar. So they fight over simple things like, should we have pot stickers for dinner or pot stickers for dinner? Because that's what I order. So
you're for the pot stickers?
I'm for pot stickers. And so that's all we do. When we recruit people, one of my guys we just recruited, we took him out to dinner and all of us ordered 16 plates of pot stickers. And we wanted to see how he reacted. If he asked the question, he's out, right?
Because
So
a pain point.
that was a pain point. That was before, here's how you conform, here's how you don't. And
When you're
the
in a-
work is where you don't conform.
When you're working in a group and trying to come up with ideas, there is an idea put forward that caught on back in the 60s, that everyone in the group should have a voice, and that you should be very polite, and there's no wrong answers. Is that the way it works in your group?
No.
There's the wrong answers, right?
No, there are stupid answers, yeah.
Clearly,
I think
one
the
of them
stupid
would be
answer is the one that's
pizza.
not courageous. It is the one that is constantly trying to appease. It is not challenging the status quo. It is not even, there's also ways to challenge the status quo, which is also kind of fakish. We want people who actually say, what if the whole business went away? What would you do then? Because if you don't really destroy what you see in front of you that's safe, then you can't create that which is existing. So we are very direct with each other, but we're not insulting. We have no need to insult. We only have the respect of each other held as very
I
sacred.
mean, does it get rough sometimes?
Rough in what sense?
People trashing other people's
Jake?
ideas.
Yeah, I think the team likes, I have some members of my team here. Conflict is good, right?
Conflict is great.
Conflict is wonderful, but if it's respectful conflict, if it is designed with an intent that is negative, where it's a power over power, it doesn't work. It usually fails.
If you blast someone's idea because you don't think it's good, people will get over it because they're all working on the same.
If you
problem.
allow your idea to be blasted, yes.
Yeah, if you're fair.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm just because I've been in groups where there was a rule that everybody's idea is welcome. There's no bad ideas. Well, I think there's a lot of bad ideas, and sometimes when you point those out, you set the whole thing in a better direction. But again, if you're blasting people and making them feel inadequate, well, maybe they don't belong on a team. That's one thing.
It all depends on the culture of your organization. If your organization is about putting people down, then everybody joins in and enjoys it. But my organization is
imagine
not
that,
built
but-
on that.
Yeah.
Although healthcare is a very polite business. People like to make nice. And it's very hard to get them to say something that could be offensive. They are very Stedford. So it took a long time to get to a level of directness where you're not your idea, but we're challenging your idea. That took a while.
You were not your
It's not like
idea.
Intel.
Bit of constructive
Right in
confrontation.
the Intel days, we were like choking each other in the living room. You know, it was very significant. It was very confrontive. It was constructively confrontive, and people came in with that.
You know,
Healthcare.
that's a great point. Microsoft is very democratic, whereas Apple, I work there, I have a lot of friends that work there, it's very top down. Like there's a decision made and it just gets propagated throughout the levels. But Microsoft is very about individuals like leading the charge from the bottom up. And that's why our research stuff just kicks ass. But the product stuff doesn't so much because you don't make singular decisions. So,
Right, so Steve Jobs would be, he would just say, these are the things we're going to explore, and then at the end of the year he goes, all right, we're going to do these 3, and that's it.
Totally.
And so then you do it.
yeah. And
But then you're not, maybe he's not taking, wasn't taking advantage of the ideas
yeah.
that come up from the
And
bottom.
so when someone like me stands up and say, this is what we're doing, I've got an army of people saying, no, that's not what we're doing. And so it doesn't, it's just a cultural thing. It doesn't embody the culture of the hero and somebody like saying this is what it is. When Bill was there, it very much was about that. And when he left, it wasn't about that. And so I think that's why our products have suffered. But it's why our research has just been amazing. We really have created the most amazing research team in the history of the world.
Wow.
And
Don't hold back. Come on.
create these things that no one's ever seen before. But turning them into products, not so much.
Don't be
Well, that happened to Xerox.
What?
That happened to Xerox too. Amazing research.
Exactly. Happened to
Which everyone
Xerox.
took advantage of except for Xerox.
No.
Oh, okay, you know, when I went to this board back here, and I just pulled some things off that caught my eye. Let's just go over these. So on the left side is things that, these are just ideas that people stuck up here. So I just want to kind of like throw these out, see what you guys think. The first one that someone wrote for sparking ideas is empathy. Anybody resonate?
Yes.
As a research social scientist, I firmly believe the way you actually get people to start thinking beyond solving their own problems is you have to be able to give people a moment they can stand in someone else's shoes.
Yeah.
Because, you know,
Yeah.
we're perfectly capable of solving our own problems, the kind of, you know, N of 1, the, you know, I really like it, that's great. And that's a good way to drive some innovation. But frankly, I think, you know, we could all stand to be able to see the world from someone else's point of view for a moment. And I think, you know, good ethnographic work will get you there, good design work will get you there, sometimes even good quantitative work will get you there. But you want to have a moment where you can see the world through someone else's eyes and hold it just long enough that you can understand that their point of view and your point of view is different. And I think those moments are hugely magic.
That's beautiful. And from a product strategy point of view, is Apple does this, Google, Microsoft, Facebook, all of them, is they tend to create products for the companies. They don't create them for the people who are using the things because they don't have that kind of empathy or they don't cherish that empathy that is in the people there. They're more about, can you sell this up and can you make this a product and make sense of it? It's very,
I think Steve Jobs was actually like that, as horrible of a person as he could be, and I knew him a bit, and we actually lived in the same neighborhood. I almost ran him over one day.
On purpose?
Marty.
But I think he didn't have empathy so much for his employees, but he certainly did for customers. Like he just knew what they would love.
Yeah,
And God help anyone who got in between him and that vision for the customer.
yeah.
And that's kind of what we all need in this business, right?
Totally.
See, like, imagine what this is going to do for the world, for the customer.
Right.
It's gonna, not everybody is good at that or even knows they should be doing it.
I think he was very rare. I mean, he's my hero, you know, and as a professional person. And I don't think we'll see his lights in a long time, you know. And as much as companies try to do it, I just don't think they'll get it. But there are individuals that embody that kind of empathy for the customer in these companies. I know them at Facebook, I know them at Google, I know them at Apple, I know them at Microsoft. You know, we're trying to bring this up. But where does that sit at the table, you know?
Well, yeah, there's
And-
no chair for them.
Yeah, and I think we're at a point where design And when I say design, I mean big D, big empathetic design, doing the right thing, like Steve Jobs would espouse, is still, everybody knows it's important. You know, like Microsoft, we got our ass kicked when the iPhone came out, and we owned the phone market, and then it just turned in almost 6 months. It turned into Apple owns it. We owned it, now Apple owns it. And it was like a $5 billion industry. And everybody said, well, it was because of design that made sense. So we hired tons of designers. I was one of them that they hired.
Yeah.
But they still don't know how to apply it. They don't know how to make it part of the culture.
Is the problem the designers themselves, or is the problem that companies
No.
don't know how to?
It's not the designers themselves. It's the companies that don't know how to apply it.
They don't know how to
And
nurture designers. I mean,
in
I always
my
thought that
opinion,
if you want to
yeah.
do what Apple does, you just go to any industrial design school, get the best students, and let them do what they've been doing in school. They will do a great job.
They will do, and we hire them, and they do wonderful work, and it gets quashed. But at Apple, because Johnny Ives is a VP, they make that a priority. And I think eventually the companies that will survive will see that, and they will like
It's been a great
espouse
example
it.
for all executives everywhere. Okay, another thing I pulled off the board is what sparks innovation is freedom. True or false?
Absolutely true.
You need freedom to innovate.
Yeah, absolutely.
Over what? I mean, I can agree to all of those, but I think in terms of priority, the question is what sparks it. I don't admire, I respect, but I do not admire the traditional inventors and innovators. I think they are respectful. They have done great things, but I admire Mother Teresa. I admire Gandhi. I admire the great reformers of our world. They innovated on the phrase non-cooperation, non-violent, non-cooperation. They transformed nations. They transformed the entire world, and you all live under that framework. Why should I worry about you running over somebody? I don't want to take that home. I don't want to take that home because, you know, it didn't happen. But I worry about where the next Gandhi is. I worry about where the next Mother Teresa is. And with all of the power we have and all of this stuff, we're still destroying each other. And when you innovate, pick higher goals. Pick stuff that's huge that you feel you cannot reach, and then it will power you. It will turn you into somebody else. Hopefully someone...
So scare yourself. Do something bigger than you
But
thought.
when lightning hits you, it's not about, I found a product I can make $2 billion. That is so passé. It is so 20th century. I'm talking about you awakening to realizing that you can actually impact the healthcare system. You can do it.
Yeah, you have to do something of meaning.
You can do it. I feel I can do it. And if I don't feel I can do it, I should give up my job. But money is not a motivator for long.
Yeah.
You have to power yourself on something that's transformative. So freedom, you make freedom. Gandhi made his own freedom.
So you're saying it's necessary?
Yeah, it's not something that is environmental. I think we keep talking about how do we flower it. And
here's what made me think.
I don't water people. I give them the conditions whereby they are indignant about something. And when they're indignant, then we are a nation of people who like to be indignant about everything.
Not freedom, but a constraint.
Yeah, it's literally a constraint. It is the opposite. It is not
That's what I was going to say.
this
That's the
idea
other one I
of,
pulled
you
off,
know,
this
thank you.
constraint.
You're welcome.
Thank you. I was looking for that word. You want to come sit over here? But I don't mean to be emotional about it, but the fact is, I think that we are picking the wrong icons in terms of
Yes.
who our
For sure.
our figures are. Gandhi created a nation of free people by using somebody else's money. He was funded. So he is an entrepreneur. Right? A true entrepreneur. His logo, if you see a bald Indian man with a stick, you think about him, no matter which way it goes. So I mean, when we think of these kinds of entrepreneurs, I respect the entrepreneurs we all use, but they're limited. They have worked under a constraint that is pretty, we can repeat that. But where do we repeat Mother Teresa? Right? Where do we repeat that? And that is a powerhouse. Billions of dollars transferred hands because of her. Just like billions of dollars transferred with Gandhi. So Don't get me on my soapbox,
How
but
conscious was she that she was an innovator? Like, how was she completely aware of it?
she wasn't conscious of herself at all. She was questioning of herself. I happen to know the person who counseled her at Kellogg. I taught at Kellogg for 12 years, and the professor counseled her, and so I had some stories from I'd missed the opportunity to be in the presence of someone like that. But the mere presence of the person transforms you into feeling guilt for this basic conversation, right? So I think I want to be in the presence of you innovators who are going to make me feel guilty about why I do what I do. And when I met some of Gandhi's grandchildren, the first question one of them asked me when I thought I was getting a good moment where I could do a selfie was, Mohan, you are named after Gandhi himself. What do you do for the world? And I spent 20 minutes babbling like an idiot about being on this board or that board or everything else, and I never could answer that question. That was 15, 20 years ago, and I'm still searching for that answer.
Awesome.
So when I was little, my mother, who was a radical feminist, early feminist Australian anthropologist, worked in the Indigenous field. Her kind of lesson to both my brother and I mean, not dissimilar, right, was always that if you could see a better world, you were morally obligated to go make it, right? You should put your heart, your body, your soul, your passion, your intellect, your professional life, and in her mind, your life on the line if it was necessary, right? And you know, I was raised by Aboriginal people who were trying to do for Australia what Gandhi had done in India, right? So with people who were genuinely on the picket and front lines of things. And there was something about that notion, hard to be Gandhi, a little easier on oneself to say, we can all imagine a better world than the world we inhabit, right? And at least for me, I think there is a moral obligation to ensure that you are working to bring that better world into existence, particularly if you have any level of privilege that makes that possible. Education, skin color, money, position. Because frankly, if we aren't all doing that, no one else is going to do it. And there's a piece that says you actually have to be
There's so many
in the
things
world
that
to
people
do
aren't
stuff.
doing, right? I mean, I was just reading a book, I don't know if any of you read it, just came out, by Peter Thiel, who started PayPal and a couple other companies, and he's a VC guy. But nothing is impossible to him. He just says, what's the problem? You see something that needs to be done and you do it. Nobody else is doing it. A lot of people would take that as, well, then it can't be done. He takes it as, well, there's nobody doing it. So if you want to do it, go do it. And why bother with anything that's not important?
But I think
So
that-
it's pretty inspiring in that way.
Yeah.
But there is something there about being clear, and I love that you talked about Mother Teresa, because I think there's something about how do we ensure that the stories we tell about innovators aren't just the same collection of Joseph Campbell main
Yes.
hero myths, right?
Right.
I mean, I spent all
Right.
of my time in Silicon Valley, and all I ever hear about are the men of Silicon Valley. But we know there were women who utterly please, we owe computing to Ada Lovelace.
Yes.
We owe half of computing to, Grace Hopper and Fran Allen and Radia Perlman and a whole bunch of other people whose names we don't talk about in the same breath. Will we be celebrating Meg Whitman because she's just made some extraordinarily smart business move that if it had been one of the others, we'd be having a different conversation? So for me, there's something about saying, yes, we should celebrate innovation. Yes, we should hold up people as heroes, because I think that is one of the ways you find a path forward, is you find someone that you can follow, right? You find a life path that you can resemble. But if we're not making sure that those people we are holding up mirror the world, we also create a sense that innovation is owned by a very particular class of people. And it oughtn't to be, and it isn't. But there's work for all of us to do every time we talk about innovation, to talk about Mother Teresa, and Alice Paul is the American suffragette of that same moment, right? There's sort of, who are the other people you would hold up that create the possibility that anyone can look at that space and go, that could be me? Because if all you do is talk about Steve and Bill and Andy and Peter and the other Mark, I mean, where does that leave 50% of the world's population looking and going, well, maybe that can't be me?
They're all great people.
They're lovely people.
They're all superb people,
Some of
and
them
I've
really
worked
were.
for half of
But,
them.
but there is
They're great
something-
people.
But how
Don't
do
get me
you-
wrong, I didn't mean to insult them.
No, and I'm
I
not-
do want to have us sort of reframe our North Star.
I don't mean to insult them either, but I think we need to broaden the canvas that we use to talk about who is innovative and why.
Right.
the heroes you
And who is number one? You know, it's like so much about
Who's number
these.
one?
Yeah, who's number one? You know, it's about being number one, and there's no sense of good enough and just doing the right thing in the world. It's so funny to be in Portland because I always think it's like purgatory. It's like no one cares about being no one cares here about being number one. They just want to do what they want to do. But in San Francisco, LA, huh? To me, yeah. And in Seattle and Vancouver and New York, where I've lived, it's all about the company rising to the top, and it's unmanageable, it's untenable, and it's getting to the point where just keeping up with that is not going to. It doesn't. It's hard to live up to the values of the people in the corporation, you know, and that's happening everywhere. So.
Yeah, well, okay. Well, it sounds like the heroes you choose are going to determine to a great extent what you become.
Well, I think they
Right.
matter, right? They at least spell out a spectrum of possibilities.
Yeah.
So choose your heroes well.
Yeah.
I mean, frankly,
Well, and recognize like Ada Lovelace. You know, recognize the true history of innovation in this country, because it's been prescribed to us this down and out bullshit. You know, but
All right, so celebrate heroes wherever you find them.
yeah.
Well, but also, as the only woman sitting on a panel of men talking about innovation, it's not just my job to keep referencing women, it's also all of your jobs to learn them and talk about them.
okay,
And-
I'm
and-
the
and-
only Indian here.
Exactly. And
And
I will talk about guns.
and I'm not a neurologist. There. I'm actually an innovator.
Yes, yes, you are.
So let's talk about another little sticky note I got there for sparking innovation. Mistakes. What do you think? Do mistakes spark innovation?
Yes, I'll speak to one. At Microsoft, I got there at the time that we owned the mobile space. We owned it. There was billions and billions and billions of dollars. And then Steve Jobs and all those people created this little thing called the iPhone, and it turned everything around. And we looked at it as if it was just an anomaly. It would fade away. There's no way, you know, if you just looked at your lives, there's no way these things could traverse this much. And it did. It changed so fast. And that's going to happen to Google. It's going to happen to Apple. It's going to happen to all these places where the fates are going to change so drastically over the next year. And I think it's the reason why is hubris. It's people think they are entitled to that position, and they think they own it. I've seen it at Apple, I've seen it at Google. They think they own these things, and there's always going to be something that's going to come in and trump them, especially where we are right now. We are at the beginning of this innovation, like, orgy, right? And it's just going to keep going. We're at the very beginning of it, and anybody who thinks they own a piece of it is going to be just fucked. I'm sorry, and I've seen it with a billion
I get
dollar,
the trail now.
a
I know
multi-billion
exactly.
dollar corporation getting screwed, and it's going to happen to all of them. And I love it. I love it. It's so awesome because anybody can create something and just own the world. I mean, Mark Zuckerberg did it, and as much as I hate Facebook, he did it, but there's going to be something that comes in and just floors everybody. And it's just going to happen. We get so addicted to the permanence of these things in our lives, they're all going to change. And the more that happens.
Okay, so Jeff, you're losing me because we were talking about mistakes. So you're counting hubris as a mistake?
Hubris is a huge mistake because you think you own this thing and that the world is as the world will be, and it's not, and it will change.
So I don't think that's what this person meant by mistakes.
Well, the answer is yes. Right?
Sorry.
Well, mistakes are mistakes part of the innovation process? I wouldn't call them mistakes, but I'll interpret to mean that you make errors of judgment when you're innovating, and you have to be forgiven for that, and you have to keep trying. They say fail forward, right? You know, so keep going. Yeah,
So
that is.
They're part of it, and maybe they don't inspire innovation or spark it, but they could.
They could.
You could make
yeah.
a mistake and go, well, that's weird. What if we just like tweak that a little bit? That might actually be.
Have I made $1 million mistakes? Yep. A number of them.
Yeah.
I don't want to publicly tell people about it because.
Well, you just did.
Yeah. But the fact is, I've made some errors in my judgment when I ran all the health plans, and I made some decisions on investments, and some of them didn't work out.
And you learned
But then, did I go back and produce a couple more billion to cover up for that one? Yes, because I wanted to feel good about what I was contributing. The biggest mistake in healthcare, for example, is that 93 years ago in Tacoma, Washington, 12 logging families got together, and they pooled their money because, you know, it's a dangerous world. And they pooled their money 93 years ago and said, we will share negotiating with doctors, and we will pay them when one of us gets hurt. That became insurance in this world. It was right up here in Tacoma, Washington, 93 years ago.
There was no insurance before that.
No. So that became the care and feeding of insurance, which was people like you and I pooling monies together, taking care of all of us as one community. Believing that I will get ill and you'll take care of me, and you will get ill and I will take care of you. So when someone has a baby among us, we all took care of that baby by paying for that care. That beautiful innovation turned into this crazy environment we have. Because everybody went crazy and said, there's money. There's a pool of money. Let's go get in that pool of money. And everybody became institutionalized and forgot about the person having the baby or losing the arm. And we changed the lens from a person-focused, sustainable system to a completely crazy, self-directed, narcissistic, institutional lens. We're going to go change that, aren't we? Because it's not going to last. That's a mistake. And somehow good people ended up doing bad things. So we got to fix that. That's the big mistake. And we're doing another big mistake in education, right? So there's these big mistakes that I want you all to get involved with and go change it, because we need you. We need your young and beautiful minds. And us old guys and gals need to kind of put ourselves in a particular place.
No, he wasn't looking at you, he was looking at you.
I was looking at him. But you know, some of us don't have the energy to take it to the next 30 years. You'll need to muster up some power and go make it happen.
That is, to me, such a frustration. And I know what it's like being 30 years old, especially in Portland, just trying to make a life for yourself, paying for your kid and all that kind of stuff, and wanting to start a business and make money and all that, and move to San Francisco, Seattle like I did. But you really have to wonder where the energy of these young people is going, you know? It's like to making more bullshit, and it's not to making what you're talking about. And do people really need another iPhone? Do they need?
I disagree.
Thank you.
Yeah,
I have to
I think there's a lot of young
I don't
people.
know.
I
I think communication is good, but I wonder where the youth, and I have a young daughter.
You need to get out more.
Out of Seattle, probably.
Yeah.
I'm inspired every day by young people.
Yeah.
And the energy that they have about cracking the code of some of these problems, because they're raised by people like us.
And they don't want to be us.
And you talk about mistakes, and you say, well, like my son, he doesn't want to go snowboarding because he's like, that's what dads do. I want to be skiing. Like, that's just not cool. And that's for old people, right? And I think today's social problems were not created by them. And I think you have a lot of young people who have a big fire in their belly to take a look at how we can change some of these things.
Okay.
You know, because they're just brought up in this and they just go, what happened?
Well, I have a daughter who's about to graduate. She spent the summer at RISD. She's about to go back there. And she's like, what's going to be there for me after I get out? And I'm like, I don't know. You know?
Tell her she is.
It's like, where are you going to work? Is she going to work at, you know, some graphic design firm making advertising? Is she going to make a product or whatever? Or is she going to make the world a better place?
So Jeff, do you think we sometimes put unnecessary limitations on our own ambitions?
I don't know.
That's a good question.
Maybe. But
Do you think we're encouraged to? I mean, is this part of being in school where your expectations are just, systematically lowered to something that they can teach?
yes, very much so. And again, my kid went through private school. She's at RISD, and she's like going through all these things. She's going to come out. She's going to be an amazing illustrator, and she's going to go into an ad firm or whatever. She's going to be like creating great things, but her mind is so big, and she wants to change the world. And I'm listening to what you're saying. I would much rather my kids work for what you're saying rather
you.
than what I'm working on right now.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
So what would this group say to someone who has difficulty being inventive?
Difficulty being inventive?
Yeah. Well, not everybody is inventive, but
So,
maybe they're
That
not.
must be frustrating.
well, so, no.
I know this.
So there's the American poet Edith Wharton wrote a beautiful piece of poetry, and she has a line in it about a candle in a window. And she says, here's the thing about the world, right? Some people are the candle and some people are the mirror. And you need to have both. And that, some people will just burn incandescent and bright because that's all they know how to do. And those people will need people who know how to reflect that light in ways that are meaningful and useful back to them and to the whole world. And I always sort of, and isn't it beautiful? It's just such a lovely piece.
It's like
right?
drop the mic. That is the most
Right
beautiful
there.
thing I've ever heard in my life. That is so cool.
Edith Wharton, and we're done. And I think part of the reason I was pushing at the beginning about why I think it's sometimes dangerous, the way we make a fetish of innovation, is we make people who don't want to be innovative, don't think of themselves that way, want a different path, we make them feel bad. And we talk about the youth as being innovative. If I were youth, that would be really kind of frustrating, right? It's like, maybe I don't want to be innovative, maybe I want to do something else. And I think there's, for me, something about saying, how is it we create a world where we celebrate a range of different talents and competencies? How do you create a world where you could be the candle, or you could be the mirror, or in the arc of your lifetime, you may end up being both?
I talk to a bunch of kids. I kind of hang out with kids, and sometimes if you go talk to innovation to grown-ups, they tend to, like you tell them, go design something new, and they won't draw, they'll write. Mm-hmm. And they'll usually sit and do it themselves, and they'll be looking up and drawing and
It's really,
getting really intellectual. You talk to kids, and they're like immediately talking to each other, and they're drawing pictures, and they're sharing their pictures. And somewhere along the line, people considered sharing cheating, right? So it's about 13 or 12 when it just gets frozen, right? And I think when I hear someone saying it's difficult to be innovative, you said inventive, but I'm assuming it's innovative, because invention, I'm having difficulty. Being creative, I'd say go back to that time. Remember when you started to draw, and when you had crayons and you knew what to do with it, and remember when you were 13 or 12 and how fun it was to share. And we train people regularly. We have workshops all over the country, and we take adults who are embarrassed to speak to each other except through a telephone or something else, and we put them in rooms, and we make them draw stupid things. And then they show their pictures, and in some times you almost think they're 12. And they almost feel like 12. And they feel that juice come back. So I don't think it's dead in you. I think it was always there. We just put so many layers on top of it. So the art of the leader is to bring that out. So I don't think yes, it is difficult. Of course, you put 20 years of weight on top of yourself, and you're trying to find your way out.
You just said, and I love what you both said, because I started my life as a creator. It was all about innovation, just breaking boundaries everywhere I could go. But then it came to a point where I was a reflector. I was someone there to facilitate for other people to be creative, and that's what I do now. And they're better than I am. They have better ideas, they are better designers, they're better illustrators, all that kind of thing. And I also think it just takes, it's just kind of life, You kind of go through this transference of being that person to being somebody a bit more open and helping other people along. And so, I don't know, I think it's a spectrum. I miss so much sitting down and illustrating and designing and being that guy who just did that and that's all I did for 10 hours a day, but I'm not that guy anymore, you know? And now I have to like correct people on what they do and I don't really like it, but at least I'm kind of elevating them to help them see their way through it. So I don't know.
So
I'm 50 years old, so I don't know.
Could I add something to that? I think one of the biggest moments, like to get serious about answering the question, when I was at NC State, I had this class called Design and Aesthetics, and it was taught by Paul Tazar. And first day you go to class, he says, so what does aesthetics mean? Can you guys just tell me, so you know, you get a full range of answers. Well, aesthetics is a study of beauty. Yes, but no. It's a study of creativity. Close, but no. And then, you know, everybody. So finally he says, you know, I just got to tell you guys, the best definition of aesthetics, which I equate to the creative process, invention, innovation, aesthetics is the opposite of anesthetic.
right.
It's like where you're actually bringing all of your senses alive, as opposed to killing them.
your senses. Yeah.
So usually when people are locked or they're having a moment, it's like, go listen to some music, go cook, go touch
Use your
something,
senses.
go make something.
Yeah.
Your senses are going to bring you alive, and something good is going to
Okay.
happen.
All right. So get away from the work, and
Yeah.
you know, I found that if I'm not creating very much, all I have to do is like just bore myself for a while.
Yeah.
Just don't do
Yeah.
anything. Just stop doing things, think about something else, get really bored, and eventually I'll come up with a project. Because I can't stand just to go on and do nothing, right? So maybe that's one of the answers. But Jeff, you said, I'm going to start wrapping it up now. You said that we're at the dawn of evolution.
Really?
I think actually,
You would say.
No,
I think you said an orgy of
And you said you really
innovation.
believe this.
orgy of
An
innovation.
orgy of innovation is what I said.
What I mean by that is, if you look at, to me, the most amazing thing that happened in my life was the internet. You know, it propelled me in so many different ways, and my kids and my life and everything, and to me, it is just in its infancy, and we keep trying to bastardize it by trying to make it very professional, make it very marketing oriented, making it very trying to tailor it to different ways, but the world and the young creative people seem to be making it something more than than the big corporations think it could be. So that's what I mean. I think that medium is still, it'll outlive me and all of us, and we have no idea what it can possibly do because we're interconnected in a way we've never been interconnected before. And to me, that's really exciting. And I'm not to get all spiritual, but it does link us together in a way we've never been linked together before. And I love that. And I can't predict it. I can't say where it came from. I can't say where it's going, but I can feel it. And I feel like that we really are together in a new way, that we've never been together before. And our consciousness is together in a way we've never been before. I don't know what's going to happen, but I do think it's a new state of evolution. I really do, because the human mind has always been disaggregated and disambiguated, and now we're coming together, and we think the internet is 20 years old. It's 20 years new, you know, it just started. And all the interfaces we try to put on it with all these companies and everything, it doesn't mean anything. The internet will last, and it will last, and it'll last, and it'll last. And it'll affect the commercial shit that I do, and it will affect the really benevolent things that you do with healthcare, and it will affect the entire world. So, I'm sorry, I have strong beliefs about it, but that's what I believe.
That's fantastic. So let's stop the panel discussion proper. The evening's getting late, so why don't we call it here? I want to thank you all for coming, and my panelists.
Thank you.
Genevieve,